Okay, picture this. It's about 10 p.m., you're laying in bed, and you're doing that mindless late night Instagram scroll. Suddenly, you pause on a coworker's baby announcement. You see the incredibly cute kid, the tiny little socks, the two parents who already look like they haven't slept in about 6 weeks. And somewhere in the back of your brain, a little voice just starts doing math you didn't even ask it to do. You start thinking about diapers, daycare, hospital bills. You remember your friend mentioning that her baby's car seat literally cost more than her first car. So you just kind of sigh and quietly close the app. Listen, if you and your partner have been talking about having kids and it seems like every single conversation ends with a calculator, a long stare at the ceiling, and a heavy exhale, I want to tell you something right up front. You're not broken, and you're definitely not selfish. Today, the entire goal of this explainer is to break down the real, unvarnished math of modern parenthood.
So we just have to jump right in and ask the massive, glaring question. Who can actually afford to have a kid in 2026? We're totally bypassing the usual pleasantries today because this financial anxiety, it's something millions of Americans are feeling right now. People are finally sitting down, running the actual numbers on having a child, and realizing that the math is, frankly, completely insane.
But of course, society absolutely loves to offer up little platitudes instead of actual math, right? Oh, you'll never be financially ready, so just go for it. We all know the exact people saying this. It's your aunt at Thanksgiving who raised 4 kids on a single teacher's salary back in 1990 and just doesn't understand why you're waiting. Or it's that TikTok mom with 6 kids, a pristine homestead, and apparently zero mortgage. You know what I mean? Everyone has an opinion, but almost nobody has a calculator.
Section 1, the math nobody wants.
It is time to put away those opinions, ignore the baby shower invitations for just a second, and bust out our calculators. We're going to run societal expectations against the actual, undeniable data, and what's truly mind-blowing here is just the sheer scale of this number. According to LendingTree's April 2026 report, the conservative average cost of raising just one child to age 18 in the U.S. is now $334,418. I mean, wow. That is up almost 28% from their 2023 number. And honestly, that's actually the low end. Other models that adjust for current inflation push that number closer to $414,000. But simply, you are looking at somewhere between $17,000 and $23,000 per year every single year for 18 straight years. And spoiler alert, that is before we even talk about college.
Now, you might be wondering, how does this actually fit into a normal American budget? Well, the median household income in this country is $83,730. That's a number that's basically been completely flat since 2019 when you adjust for inflation. So when you actually run that math, we're asking the median American family to spend up to 25% of their entire lifetime gross income on raising just one child, a quarter of everything you earn. And remember, that is gross income. That's before the IRS even shows up to take their cut for taxes.
Section 2, birth and the first year.
Okay, let's see how this builds chronologically, because it starts early. Before you even have a toddler running around, there are staggering costs incurred before the baby even eats solid food or, focuses its eyes. Just the physical medical act of getting the human out of the body is a major financial event. If everything goes perfectly, your out-of-pocket insurance share for a birth is nearly $3,000. But if anything goes sideways, and by the way, 18% of newborn admissions involve some time in a neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU, the average NICU stay costs $71,158. Now sure, you probably have family insurance with an out-of-pocket maximum. In 2026, that cap is over $10,600, which is fantastic if you just happen to have 10 grand sitting in a checking account that isn't already earmarked for groceries and rent. Before the baby is even home, you've potentially handed over the equivalent of a reliable used car.
And then we hit parental leave. The American federal floor for paid leave is exactly zero. Zero. If you take the full 12 weeks of unpaid family and medical leave just to bond with your newborn, the median full-time worker loses about $14,400 in wages. So combine that with the hospital bill, and you're down roughly $17,000 before you've even bought your first bulk box of Pampers. But sure, Aunt Susan, just go for it, right? Section 3, the childcare cost crisis. If diapers and formula are the appetizer, childcare is absolutely the entree. It is the single line item that breaks middle-class families cleanly in half. Nationally, center-based daycare averages $13,128 a year. But if you live in a major city, that average falls drastically short. In Washington, D.C., it averages over $24,000. And we aren't talking about fancy luxury Montessori schools with like goat yoga. We're talking about the regular, run-of-the-mill daycare down the street. To put that into perspective, dropping a 1-year-old off at daycare now costs more than sending an 18-year-old to a 4-year public university in 41 states. That's wild. Infant care literally costs more than in-state college tuition. Right now, 1 in 5 families is spending over $30,000 a year on care, pulling from their emergency savings just to survive the toddler years. Which naturally leads couples to think, okay, well, one of us will just stay home. Boom, problem solved. Welcome to the two-income trap. When one parent, and statistically it is almost always the mother, leaves the workforce to dodge that massive daycare bill, it activates what economists call the motherhood penalty. Administrative wage data actually shows women's earnings get cut roughly in half after their first child. Because you aren't just saving on daycare for a few years, you are permanently sacrificing your career trajectory, your social security base, and years of compound retirement growth. Staying home is not a simple financial fix, it's a massive lifelong trade-off. Section 4. The middle class squeeze. Let's ground all these massive abstract statistics in reality for a second. Take Jack and Emily. They're a hypothetical upper-middle-class couple living in Denver. Jack's a project manager, Emily's a nurse. They have a really solid combined income of $156,000, a Subaru, and a 14-month-old toddler. By all accounts, they are doing everything right. But let's walk through their actual monthly math. After taxes and their 401k contributions, they take home $9,400 a month. Subtract $2,400 for a modest 2-bedroom apartment, now we drop to $7,000. Take out $1,950 for daycare, we're at $550. Deduct $750 for groceries, $1,100 for 2 cars and the insurance, and $1,400 for student loans, utilities, and out-of-pocket health copays. Just like that, their $9,400 take-home pay is squeezed all the way down to just $1,800. And that $1,800 has to cover literally everything else in their lives: clothes, unexpected expenses, diapers, toddler shoes, the whole shebang. Which brings us to this incredibly chilling reality. Jack and Emily are saving roughly $200 a month. They make $156,000 a year. They are well above the median in every single category that matters, and yet they have less margin in their budget than their parents had on a single income back in 1985. This is exactly what having a kid in 2026 feels like. Constantly checking your bank account before every single grocery run, and completely dreading a $30 art supplies fee from the daycare. Section 5. The long-term price tab. Now, you might be thinking, well, eventually daycare ends and public school's free. You can relax then, right? Not exactly. Let's pivot from those immediate toddler years to the compounding, systemic expenses that quietly inflate as your kid grows up. I call this the escalator of parenthood. First, you have that daycare crunch we just talked about. Then, as they grow, your family healthcare premium jumps to an average of $26,903 a year. Then, suddenly, that 2-bedroom apartment feels way too tight. You want a good school district, which means you're paying a neighborhood housing premium of $12,000 to $18,000 more per year just to be in the right zip code. You see, you're not just adding a kid to your life, you're upgrading your entire life infrastructure. And we haven't even touched on college yet. If your newborn is heading to a 4-year private college in 2044, projections show the cost could exceed $575,000 for a single degree. That is over $500,000. If you want to avoid your kid taking on massive debt, you literally need to be putting hundreds of dollars a month into a 529 plan starting the very week they're born. Section 6. Falling birth rates. So when you zoom out and look at the macro-level consequences of all this math, the honest financial floor to raise a kid in a major metro area is easily $400,000 to $500,000 before college. To pull that off without going into debt, financial planners suggest you need a household income of at least $150,000 to $200,000. So what happens when the vast majority of the population doesn't make that? The U.S. general fertility rate drops to 53.1 births per 1,000 women. That is an all-time low in data going all the way back to 1909. We are literally having fewer babies per capita right now than during the Great Depression. This isn't just a cultural vibe or a generational complaint. This is millions of Americans sitting down, running the exact numbers we just went through, and concluding that the math simply does not work. Now, the government is aware of this math, and there have been some systemic policy updates recently. For example, the child tax credit has been bumped up to $2,200. The dependent care flexible spending account limit was also raised to $7,500. Additionally, there's a new policy, referred to as the Trump account, that provides newborns with a one-time $1,000 federal contribution invested directly into an index fund. These are the current systemic levers being pulled at the federal level to try and address the financial burden on parents. However, it is pretty illuminating to contrast the U.S. reality with our peer nations. While the US spends roughly $500 per child on government childcare subsidies, the OECD average is about $14,000 per child. In countries like France and Denmark, paid leave is guaranteed and childcare spots are heavily subsidized, often costing parents under $500 a month total. So the baseline infrastructure in those countries is just fundamentally different from the entirely out-of-pocket reality faced by American parents. Section 7. The final calculation.
We've looked at the daycare costs, the housing premiums, the lost wages, and the overall systemic setup. And I want to speak directly to your financial reality right now and just validate the anxieties you might be feeling when you look at your own spreadsheets. You are allowed to look at this math and decide it doesn't work for you. I am giving you explicit, empowering permission to ignore the societal pressure. Seriously, ignore the aunt at Thanksgiving. Ignore the influencer moms. Their opinions are completely irrelevant because guess what? They aren't the ones signing your daycare checks. You are allowed to be honest about what your income can actually support without turning your marriage into a 24/7 financial stress simulator.
Look, if the math works for you, that's beautiful. Run the numbers, build that emergency fund, and go for it. But if it doesn't, please do not let anyone shame you. The absolute smartest financial decision right now might just be the one nobody is posting about on Instagram. Waiting until you're older, having one kid instead of 3, or deciding to opt out entirely. These are incredibly valid, math-backed choices. The numbers are screaming the truth. The only question left is, what does your calculator tell you? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next explainer.